Oh,
All
cool.
right, we're live now. Welcome back to Lit Fridays, Augustonians, and welcome to everyone joining our series for the first time. If you are just joining us, Lit Friday is a monthly digital program held via Zoom and broadcast via Facebook on the final Friday of every month from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. Eastern. We feature writers, thinkers, and artists from the African diaspora and engage in conversations about their processes and creative lives. Next month, on March 25th, we are happy to have Mikel Owuna returning with his co-director Marquez Red to discuss their film Obi and Boo, The Primordial House, which is, the debut is sold out. So congratulations, it's supposed to happen as well. They'll share next month on March 25th, they're gonna share a trailer with us and answer some questions. So if you missed it and want more information, we'll have that ready for you. Tonight, we are eager to welcome poet Nikki Wallschlaeger. Welcome, Nikki. We appreciate you making time for us. Nikki Wallschlaeger's work has been featured in The Nation, Brick, American Poetry Review, Witness, Kenyon Review, Poetry, and others. She's the author of the full-length collections Houses from Horseless Press in 2015 and Crawl Space from Bloof in 2017, as well as the graphic book I Hate Telling You How I Really Feel in 2019, also from Bloof Books. She is also the author of an artist book called Operation USA through the Baltimore-based book arts group Container, a project acquired by Woodland Pattern Book Center in Milwaukee. Her third collection, Water Baby, which we will be discussing tonight, is out from Copper Canyon Press. It's fresh, it was published last year, and she is currently a visiting associate professor at the Iowa Writers Workshop. I also want to thank everybody for their patience. We had a little technical glitch, but here we are ready to do the thing and have you listen to some amazing poetry. So thank you again, Nikki, for your patience.
Thank you.
We're ready to hear some good poetry.
All right.
I'm going to disappear so everyone can just focus on Nikki. We'll be back for the conversation.
Okay. Women are doomed to be the angels of love. This is so true. I involuntarily doodle hearts everywhere I go. I sign my letters compulsively with hearts, dream of disobedient hearts, work with hearts. I eat them. I boil sauces and the tomatoes on my cutting board form a daisy chain heart. My feet are bound in red ballet slippers, Lisa Frank style, engorged with crusty satin hearts. I pronounce my name with an embarrassingly hearty accent. My colostrum pools with the plumping of an inflamed heart, inspired by the nutritional needs of my babies. Hearts are spray painted on trains like talismans, guiding me eventually to the heart afterlife, where my treasured friends exist in heart time, drinking wine and organizing a workers' collective named Heavenly Valley Emotional Workers in the mossy, hidden heart clouds, where my restless heart tires of hearing famous singers singing sweetly about unsatisfying love in the grocery store, when their hearts could be screaming about environmental devastation and global capitalism. The way this callous storm pill I saw online, plastered with hearts and dream catchers, says, only good vibes, is in no way related to what the hearts of this country really need. On good days, I submit to being a committed student of the heart. On bad days, I am paranoid and anxious about my heart being kidnapped by intruders in blue uniforms, and how a scene in Indiana Jones in the Temple of Doom, where the sacrificial victim's heart gets ripped out, in one of Hollywood's stereotypical cinematic presentations of Indigenous culture, sent me a message about men who are so powerful they could take what they wanted from my body with their bare hands. Where do bad folks go when they die? Asked Kurt Cobain on my favorite Nirvana album. I replace folks with hearts and marvel at the candor of strange, smarmy men on TV who want to be president, who have no clue being part of a community is different from purchasing investments in a city. My heart is stone sore. My heart wants to close forever to protect me from market combat. But as a woman bred for strength and openness, I lack options. I'm pretty good at the precarious art of choosing what gets in. Since doom makes a great gatekeeper, it's rainwater in a vase of roses on a sleeping hero's grave. It's a daisy. Bats twin the sky, drowsy from billowing home to watch night court. I, Nikki, as a contemporary woman, am bound to ask who's spiraling in the faucet. If you keep no-lie relaxers on your hair past the suggested time frame, the original cripple pattern becomes more defiant. Memories won't comfort me. Perhaps it's best not to trust the politics of people who haven't washed their own dishes in 20 years. Oh, missile management, I request a transfer for the masses, a happy, howling cocktail, showing instead of telling this country that I cannot with you. A free daylight may be possible, the revolt in us, I mean. Stems are still holding like a grown-up, but they snap. You pick me up, pour me another bath, a glass of something dry for the blisters. Read Ted Jones's Hand Grenades. Remember that. I'm not the only one, and cry. When the devil leads us home and yells surprise. Is that your house, he asked. This used to be my house, I said. But those are not your people, so that can't be your house. But it is my house, I said. I had some people, maybe a few. Even though those are not your people, even though they don't look like you. I had to live somewhere, I said. This is the house where I lived. But where are your people, he said. My people live in a different house, and they don't care to know about me. If you're the devil, why are you asking me questions? The devil said, since the house you had to live in is gone, I thought you'd be happy. It sure is a hot day, I said. Of course it is, said the devil. Why do you think I work in town? I have time for one more. Is that okay?
Yes, please.
All right. Why do I feel so old when I look so young? Why do I feel so old when I look so young? Have a night of okay fun, and I feel better and younger, refreshed, maybe lovelier. But in the morning, I feel just as old again. Hey friend, how are you? I see you're young too, around the same age as me. Look at those folks with their big boy pens and crooked chairs. They act younger than we do, and our lives are somewhere else, in faces even older than these. When I was younger, people thought I was older, so they did older people things to me, said things too. Probably why I'm feeling old when I'm still looking young. Because of what older people did when I was little. Should have known better not to do. Say, friend, I hear you too. Things happen to you. That's the way evil goes. Let people do bad things. Don't know why that is, but the how is inside the what, tying the ends of the who. And we can stop it from going to the next someone. Yes, it's like that. The could've, the should've, and the would've. If I would have known then what I know now, maybe I could have got out of the way, but I was too young, and now I'm older, outside the what and the who, but still inside the how and the why. Let me introduce my old ass self. How do you do? My name is Young, plus the last time I loved without fear. Thank you.
Incredible. Thank you so much. I was hoping you would read the conversation with the devil. It's like one of my many favorites out of Water Baby itself. And one of the things about Water Baby, about all of your work, but very prominently in Water Baby, is the way that my mind reacts to the very quick images, right? And it's this mixture of all of the speed of a normal day, also mixed with what we consume in media, right? It's almost like it seems random, but it's all planned and it's an algorithm. And there's a way that your work is able to imagistically hold the two speeds together. So I want you to talk a little bit about speed and images in your work, because it's incredible. It's like an incredible like part of reading your poetry.
Speed and rhythm. Well, I suppose I look at poetry when I'm writing it as the poem is having a conversation with myself and, the many personas and speakers that come through as I'm writing. And they all have a particular way of talking, but they all have a good sense of rhythm. That's a requirement, however way it comes out.
So when you, sorry.
So when the poem, decides it wants to speak, it's going to speak in a way that, will use whatever it wants in terms of language, right? But it's got to flow together. Yeah, and that's how I make images that no one would necessarily think of that would go together. That's how I allow them to go together and to stand side by side. And then the flow, the language, the rhythm is what connects it.
Can you say more about the speakers that you mentioned and the requirement of rhythm and where those speakers come from and how you hear them or interact with them?
Well, I mean, obviously they all come from me, because where else would they be coming from? But, different aspects of myself that I think I have, fashioned into these characters. Like, there's an older woman in me that she talks a lot. She writes a lot of my poems. An older woman that's kind of, just fed up, kind of wise, or how I imagine wisdom to sound like. That's reminiscent of like my grandmother, the way that she would talk. Just kind of like, not all knowing, but she knew the things that she knew. And now, they're living on in me.
Do you ever feel that when you're interacting with the different personas, the different voices that you write with, that you have to kind of like orchestrate them when they all speak at the same time? I keep asking, I'm also like a writer. And so I'm always interrogating, like, where is this coming from? Or how am I hearing this? Or who is that? And so you have a very clear understanding of that. And so it's like, how, do you feel like you decide which one will speak, or are you just constantly listening and like responding to who needs to say what in terms of your work?
I think the latter. They don't all speak at once. Sometimes, they don't speak at all. It's another side of me that is coming out. But like the specific speakers, like I'm familiar with them. I find that when I'm dealing with some really heavy stuff, that those speakers tend to take over for me. Like I have to give that to a persona in order, to have some distance. If that makes sense.
No, it makes a lot of sense in terms of I'm thinking about your poem that where you mentioned dissociation. Astral travel got me effed up. There's like an asterisk with the effed up. And the comment, saying the comment, like, sometimes these speakers have to take over for me, because Water Baby is about the intersection of, you know, the Black feminine, Black women, motherhood, and then living in just, you know, what Christina Sharp would call just this weather, right? That creates all of this additional pressurized environment that really makes the necessities exhausting, right?
Mhm.
And so the necessities being just the things you absolutely have to do, have this way of combusting you when you're a Black woman in such an environment, and also a Black mother. And so I guess I'll just skip ahead to that poem, and wanting to know more about it as well, because it's one of my favorites. And it's a thing where, like, my favorite line is, "Then one day you find yourself in a wig shop trying on blonde wigs, brandishing yourself as Barbie." And I love that, because I've had this experience with friends where we need to kind of get out of our minds, and we kind of go to the wig shop. And it's obviously a common enough occurrence, because some wig shops have the rule where you can only try on 3. You can only try on 4. If you try on another, you have to buy it, or at least that's what it looked like in Atlanta. And so it's like the disassociation, or the intercession, right, of the personas that speak for you, renders a dissociation that's just like considered a medical condition as a survival mechanism, right? As a way to protect yourself, to kind of go sit in the park bench of your interior and watch things go by and be protected for a moment. But the poem ends with you saying, you can only do that so many times before you don't, until, suggesting a coming backness. Could you say more about Astral Travel Got Me Effed Up? Because it's just such a beautifully clear piece.
Yeah, I mean, it's about everybody has their ways to escape. But, you know, if you keep escaping so much, all of you will be gone in the end. You know, that's what the until is. I mean, the until is left like that abruptly, because that's, you know, for the reader to decide, or for the person that is telling the other, because this is a conversation that the speaker is having with somebody else, you know, kind of like words of wisdom that they're passing down. You know, that it's, you know, it's a good idea to have a root somewhere to keep you tied down to earth, or else you'll just, you know, become this wraith, this of your formal self. I will say about about the wig part, that's totally me. I mean, no disrespect, you know, to Black women who wear long wigs, but sometimes I wonder a little bit about that, especially, you know, growing up in the 80s and having like lots of blonde Barbie dolls, more than I had of Black Barbie dolls, because there weren't as many during that time. I'm 39, so just thinking about how that has had an effect on the self-esteem and image of Black women, even if, you know, I mean, I understand, you know, it can be just dress up and just, you know, for fun, or trying something different, or some people, you know, it's just like a color hair that you just kind of, you know, try on for a little while. It's no big deal. But I guess for me, you know, growing up as one of the only Black children in a school of mostly white kids, it had a different meaning for me. Of like, you know, assimilation, and, you know, that Black hair. I mean, I have Black natural hair. That's how I've worn it for years. I used to straighten my hair, stuff like that. But you know how that might possibly be connected.
Yeah. Not
always, but, you know.
No, I was recently in a room where it wasn't like a great conversation, but there was a discussion about 2, you know, academic Black women, and their ways of presenting themselves. And there was a lot of judgment about the hair being straightened, and almost seemed like the conversation about Black hair was being used to hold up one Black woman like over another. And I was very interested in this kind of interfering politics of people who were not Black women at a table making the commentary.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and so I was, you know, taken aback, but I also kind of came to understand, you know, like how Black women's, because it's like, for me, like Black women's aesthetics and inventiveness and how we fashion ourselves, our hair, our clothes, our makeup, is always about repurposing symbols, right? Like I always see the repurposing of symbols, the repurposing of fashions that were supposed to not be representative of us, or not having that thing is supposed to make some definition of us, when who we are as a community and individually is always evolving, and how people take up certain gestures almost in offense, and it's a moral thing for them, whereas for us it's our attempt at, you know, play and like knowing ourselves better. And so the wig in particular struck me because it's like knowing what that experience is, right? It's like when I cited the experience of like me and my friends just going to wig shops and trying on red wigs or blonde wigs, it was literally just exploration, right? But for other people, it's a moral judgment, and it's a heavy thing, right? Because it's like an everyday moral judgment that we move through. And then again, like thinking about like Nobody's Special, right? That's the first poem in Water Baby. And the repetition of nobody's special, and the rhyme scheme as well, really sunk into me. And I kind of received it as like the building of a new intimate language, right? I think there's something about being a mother. I'm only an auntie, but I've seen Black women develop very intimate new languages for their children. And sometimes amongst their children, like different ones, you know, like have different languages that they speak to in, or different dialects and cadences of communicating. And I think repetition is a part of that, because when you repeat something, it takes on new meanings. It becomes bigger and more expansive. So I wanted to know about repetition in Nobody's Special, but it's also builds a musicality throughout Water Baby itself. And I know that sometimes, you know, as poets, it's like, oh, can we repeat something? Is it redundant, you know? But it just creates such like rich, various images in my mind for something that seems on its face simple, but it's not, to say nobody's special when someone is taking care of your existence, the comfort of your existence, your everyday existence.
Sure. Well, when I was writing this book, I was listening to a lot of blues music. So those poems that start each separate section are all in blues format. So that's why they're repetitive. Last semester, I just taught a seminar at the Iowa Writers Workshop on blues, the blues form and poetry and blues music. So that was a lot of fun. But yeah, there is a lot of power in repetition. But I also think repetition has the power to be spontaneous as well, which was what I was trying to do in the book. So, you know, it wasn't too repetitious. So it can still surprise. It doesn't always have to be totally rhyming, or within, you know, the rhyming lines. You can pack a lot of things in there that, you know, otherwise wouldn't be there if you just followed like the normal rules of rhyming.
And then I also think that something in Water Baby that, like, I just fell in love with so many parts of this book. I know I keep saying it, but so many of the techniques, and it's probably just me thinking in images like a lot, but thinking also about the chords you strike together, right? There's often sometimes this debate about like, you know, like poetry should be political. And then people say, well, depending on who you are, your poetics are political, depending on what you're writing about, right? But even in the first poem that you read, there's this amazing kind of balance where you're able to connect the politics of the everyday, right? The necessities to greater systems and greater issues, and show how they directly affect one another. And I think that that's like a I feel it's like a superpower, right? Because I think a lot of writers try and do their version of it, but it's like, it's so like a relief, right? When I read and I see the way you're able to connect the two together, I feel like, oh, yes, like that is how you say that. Like that is how you make these connections without engaging in the arguments we often have with people that are like, oh, is it connected? And you're like, absolutely. So it's like, how, like as a writer, like what's your process for reaching that balance in your work? And it's an important lens for you. And how did it come to be so important for you?
Well, I think you know what your politics are, you're not going to be self-conscious about them. And that's not, and if you're not self-conscious about them, there's going to be more of a balance between that and the personal in your work. Because one's politics are, you know, become embedded in you, you know, they're your life, you know, the part of your life. So, I mean, my advice, you know, for poets who are writing political poetry is don't try to make it political. Just write how you feel, because your politics will come through that. If you try to write, you know, political poems, I think you'll get self-conscious. Then it won't come out the, you know, the way that you want it to. You know, it'll be detached, like from the self, from the individual self, which is just as important. You know, I think there's a lot of pressure Black poets have to, you know, be these observers of, you know, politics. But, you know, the individual is just as important. I mean, when I write, I think, you know, writing for myself, that's, you know, that's what I'm doing. It's me and the page, and this is my place. I mean, naturally, one's politics are going to come out in everything, you know, even when you're not aware of it. So I guess, you know, just knowing yourself, spending a lot of time, you know, making those connections between your life and the world and other people's lives. I mean, you know, your politics will naturally just form along with your own growth and development as a person. Yeah, I mean, it's not separate.
Another symbol that conjured an image for another series symbol, it is a symbol, the bathtub and the water baby as well. I love the bath. I love baths, but I also just love, I don't know, like I read the bathtub as being almost like a vehicle, like almost like a spaceship or like a portal to just get into the bathtub. And when I was reading The Body Keeps the Keys and Black Woman in Bathtub 21st Century, I went to look for an image of Frida Kahlo's painting from 1938 called What the Water Gave Me. And in the tub, there's, you know, an image of the child she lost and an image of her spine from her injury. And there's all of this kind of washing away and kind of settling in the tub, right? In a way that kind of transported, I guess, her to a reflective space, but also thinking about how, you know, like the leisure of a bath is a process, right? And it's a private process. And the process involves kind of going through that calming down. And the water in your poems is a character, right? As it moves and arises as a presence, you know, and interacts with you, the speaker, and it just interacts with being the place where, you know, things kind of come clean, they become naked, right? In the space of the water. Why should we all be taking baths and thinking honestly to ourselves? Like, what does a bathtub mean for you as like a poet? And it appears so welcomely throughout Water Baby itself.
Well, the house that I grew up in, for the longest time, we didn't have a shower. So that was how I, kept myself clean. Bath time was a fun time. I'd bring my Barbies in there and stuff. And I'd play with them for hours. And then after a while, I would go to the bathtub and read my books while I was taking a bath. So I still do that.
I was never allowed to do that. My mom was like, oh, no, you're not taking a
I've never dropped a book in the bathtub. So
That's amazing.
yeah. Else when I'm taking a bath, I guess I'll get some of my best ideas and inspirations and stuff for my work. So I'll remember it and write it down after a bath. I don't like hot water is just so comforting. I mean, it's an important ritual that I've done all my life. It's just become more and more important to me as I've gotten older. As a place to just, not get away, but just sit for a bit with water to keep me company. It's a friend.
Yeah, that's why they always tell people make sure you hydrate. It is your friend.
Yeah.
Do you, yeah. And then also I think it's like in the poem, not that I thought of them as bath toys, but people do have kind of ritual objects that they bring with them when they go to take a bath. And those objects are in the poem along with everything in the speaker's head. And it's like, I don't know, I feel like it's like a laying out a blanket, like a clear moment to just kind of look at everything and then just say, okay, like I can see everything clearly now. What else do you bring to your baths besides books?
Oh, sometimes I'll bring my laptop in the bathroom and I'll watch shows. I put lots of oils and various bubble baths and Epsom salt stuff. Candles sometimes too, but mostly books.
I admire your bravery. I'm always like, I can't take my laptop in the bath. I mean, I have like a shower now, right? But like I can't take it's gonna get wet. I'm gonna drop it. So it's like a lot of like trust, right? And you're in like bringing, it's like a different level of like self-trust. Like, yeah, I'll take this, and it's beautiful because I think it's an opportunity, right? That'll I think like maybe most people don't take. And having like that kind of beautiful quiet moment, right, with your own entertainment, sitting in the water itself, and then ending and having that the clean feeling, like the happy, like clean feeling, like you got a chance to play, like the bathtub replacing the playground as you get older,
Yeah, it's a cheap luxury.
For sure.
I didn't grow up in a family with a lot of money. We're pretty poor, but the bath was always there. So another thing that you brought up, like laying out a blanket, right? That's another thing I love to do. That I did a lot when I was a child. I loved to lay out a blanket in the sun and read books. I still do to this day. So I feel like it's definitely related to me taking baths. That's another cheap thing that you can do that feels luxurious, is laying out in the sun. I love that. That's one of my favorites to do.
I collect like crochet blankets. And before my cat, Zora Neale Hurston, gets to them and starts kneading them and licking them, like like they always get dirty with me taking them outside because I live near a park. And so I just kind of lay them out on the grass. And I know people kind of get outdoor blankets, but they have that plasticky feeling.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's not comfortable to kind of lay on in the grass in the sun and like take your time to read. But that's also like a transportation, right? As the bathtub gives you the comfort of being able to go other places in your mind and kind of disconnect, turn everything down, go low power mode, right? The blanket also does that.
Yeah, it's a dreaming place.
Yeah.
Yep. I've done that for many years, like bringing my notebooks out and my books and just laying there in the sun. And I love being outside. So I'm just taking my notes and letting, my thoughts just kind of go with the clouds or the breeze or the grass, whatever happens.
It sounds like a part of the creative process, your creative process, or your creative process is living in this intentional way where it's like essential for you to have stations of comfort.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Stations. Ones that I can make.
Exactly. That relate to you. I think there's a lot of pressure on Black poets as well as young poets to experience rigor in their work in a very maybe like exhausting way, or it's a regiment that seems more like a punishment, right, than it does like an opportunity to put oneself into their work and kind of ask some questions and think of some things, right? And so I appreciate that, it's the orchestration of the everyday of your everyday, that kind of rigor, it's attentiveness to the needs, right? That is your place of process.
Yeah.
Yeah, it loosens up a lot of expectations I think that people have, right, of what writers should look like they're doing, especially Black writers should look like what they're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm not necessarily sitting there trying to write a sestina or anything like that. So
you're like, I know some people have that process. Good for that's good. That's not my process.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's fun to try out different forms, but you don't have to write in all of them if you don't want to. That's why I tell my students, it's not required. You want to, though. Forms are a nice, ready-made way to organize a poem. That's all they are. You don't even have to worry about inventing your own forms either. Like, it's okay.
As long as you make it yours, right? The form is to make it yours.
Yeah, and that's what I did with Crawl Space.
Yes. You want to say more about Crawl Space?
See, I wrote that a while ago. I wrote that when I was still living in Milwaukee, so I think I chose the sonnet form because I just felt so kind of confined, maybe. I wrote that at work a lot. I was working at a call center, this place called Captel, and they make phones for the deaf and hard of hearing. My job was to transcribe one half of the conversation that I would hear through a headset, so the person with a phone that needed to read the text would be able to see it come up on the phone as they're talking. So during, we would get, so many calls a day. So in between calls, we could read or write. So I was in a cubicle all day long. So between those calls, I started writing those poems. So I think, where I was working, definitely affected how I chose the form. Because I wasn't boxed in a building, boxed in a cubicle, looking at this little square of a screen all day.
But that also seems like of course we all know how cubicle jobs can be, but being a poet and writing poetry between calls, did you guys have like a style manual for how you affected certain emotions as you were transcribing, or was that like up to you to kind of try to convey what a person was saying through like text with punctuation,
the computer program kind of did that on its own. Like if somebody was laughing, it would show parentheses laughing, like that would do it, or like crying or something. But no, it wasn't supposed to get that detailed. least that was a long time ago, excuse me. Yeah, yeah, it wasn't, it wasn't too intricate. There are no emojis or anything like that.
I would like probably end up like eating eating wood chips of frustration, like wanting to add an M dash, like just throw it in there for like some kind of emphasis, and the person on the other side is like, what is that? How do I read that? And
Well,
so
the program was is that you had a headset on, so you were revoicing. So
okay.
you would speak these words, what you were hearing, and then they would show up on the screen. So
That's an incredible experience. Did that also, aside from feeling encompassed like in a box, which is why you chose the sonnet form, what else about alternating between that process and the poetry kind of filtered into the work?
well, I mean, everything, is confidential there. So I guess, there you go. So, I couldn't use what I was hearing, to use it as poetry fodder. So I didn't do that. Um, I mean, I've kept, I don't know how many, I have so many journals and stuff. So it's very normal for me to write down, bits of poems and then develop them as they come along. So to have a job where I could do that in between calls, and I was encouraged to do that, that was great. And like you maybe talk to your supervisor once a day. So you were on your own, and I love that part of it. But I mean, sitting in a cubicle all day, though, was a lot.
Yeah.
So for somebody who's, introverted, that was kind of the perfect job for me at the time.
And then I think it's like, I said this before, like, I appreciate the honesty in Water Baby in regards to just the necessities and the everyday becoming like exhausting, right? And that honesty being like a scary place to be able to say, like, oh, these things that I have to do each day can get heavy, right? And that's a challenge, the challenge to say, yes, it is exhausting, but this is the everyday. The basics can truly overrun you. And I feel like that's posing a question to the reader, like, are you seeing what I'm seeing? Is this feeling feel normal for you? Do you also have thoughts that this may not be the way that it's supposed to be? And I want to know, I want to talk more about how that experience relates specifically to, like, being a Black woman and fleshing that out more just like in conversation.
Well, many of the things that we live with every day are not the way it's supposed to be. But that doesn't mean that we're still not living and doing the best that we can. Even when we're not doing the best that we can, one's life is still a poem. That's how I see my life. It's a poem. It's how I lived, and how I'm here, and how I perceived and experienced the world. So, I will unapologetically say my life is a poem. Even if I have to do things that aren't that interesting, I make them interesting. That's how I see them, and it's interesting to me. I'm a really curious person, so it's not the word wonder isn't really accurate. Because poets get, such a cliche, like, oh, poets like see the world with this wide wonder. I'm like, nah. I mean, there's things that we like. Well, I'm speaking for myself, like right here, obviously. I mean, I like to look. I like to look at what I see. I like to see what I look at. And poetry is a great way to do that. And language there as the tool that I chose to do that with for my visions.
I love how thinking of one's everyday in life as a poem can really help recalibrate how one relates to all the things you have to do, right? And it helps, and I don't know why, it makes me think of sci-fi in a way, and how science fiction makes something that seems very normal all of a sudden seem like very abnormal. And it's in a sentence, it can happen. It's in a paragraph break, it can happen. And in that way, I think poetry is like speculative, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm really into sci-fi too. I'm a big Star Trek fan. So I'm really happy that you said that.
Well, it's thinking around an image, right? Like if you have something as simple as kissing your partner goodbye in the morning and walking out of the door, you can write a svelte book about all of the different facets of the way you can think about that, talk about that, all of the pressures that are within it, all of the pressures that are outside of it, what you wish it could only be, right? As far as like, I wish it was simpler, or, you know, having the concern of whether or not you and your partner will like make it home as Black people for something as simple as, you know, being in a Walmart and picking up a toy gun. And so it's like poetry, that was that deepening of like speculation around something that's incredibly simple.
Yeah, nothing is simple. Nothing is. Everything is very complicated and complex. And thank God it is.
Right.
Because if things were as simple as so much of American culture wants to make it out to be, I mean, that would be even more painful.
Yeah. Another poet that comes to mind is Rachel Zucker in her book Pedestrians.
Mhm.
And thinking about this is very like everyday images and relationships and interactions, and each of the like very like blocked prose poems, they kind of remind me of runes at times.
Mhm.
And thinking about like domestic intimacy and how constructed it is and how recent those constructions are,
Yeah.
as an expectation, but how we all just think that it's like, oh, this is the normal, this is the way, right? It's like, well, it's kind of only been the way for the last like 150 years or so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like it's that could be considered new in all of in the history of the way humans live together, have
Yeah.
lived together.
Yeah. I mean, the diversity of life on this planet is it's endless. And the way that people live, when you get past, dominant narratives and how, you know, society is structured to make it look like things are uniform, but they really aren't. When you get to know somebody too on a really intimate level, you just realize how strange and fascinating and individual people are.
No, it is. It's like I kind of relate like becoming like intimately connected with people with eating, the jelly belly bags, like jelly beans.
Mm.
It seems that there's all this uniformity, right? You see some repetitions of certain shades of color, some things have spots, some jelly beans are spotted, but you have to really kind of, taste the jelly bean and eat the jelly bean. And then sometimes like the container, or you think you know what the theme of the bag is, and then you eat it and you're like, oh no, that is popcorn. That's really, really like surprising, right? Like surprising and like strange. The ways that how people become those threads that make a braid of a person, are just so very like specific and incredible, sometimes in horrible ways and sometimes in wonderful ways. And then I have also a question, and I know it may seem like repeated, but I want to know so I can like read these poets too. But like, who is the first poet that you read that made you say, I want to do this? And or who is the first poet that you read that made you say, I can do this?
Wanda Coleman.
Mm.
But I was reading Charles Bukowski before her. I was writing poetry before that, before I started reading poetry. I don't know, some guy friends of mine, when I was like a teenager, were reading him. So I started reading him. I was like, whoa, I like this because it was so working class, you know. I recognized some things in his work. I mean, he wasn't like obviously he was not a great guy. But there were things in there that I was like, huh, this is how poetry can be. It can be this real. And then through him, through because through Black Sparrow Press, I found Wanda Coleman. I'm like, oh, she's the one. She was the one who first really taught me that I could write like, really angry poems and do them so artfully. And that I didn't have to sound like anybody else. Because as you read her, you can tell each poem that she writes is her.
Mm.
Yeah, and she's been described as like a singular poet. And, there really is something to be said of poets like that. And I think that's why I was attracted to Bukowski too, because he is who he is. And then it wasn't until I got to college, because I kind of thought at that point, because I also was reading like in fiction, like the beats and stuff. So by the time I got to college, I kind of had this idea, that poets are all kind of people off the beaten path, more like these countercultural weirdos, for better or for worse. But then I got to college and I'm like, oh, what is that? What? Like the institutional study of poetry, even though those kind of personalities are still there. Then when we get into, poets who taught at Harvard or, all these like illustrious academic careers and have this kind of, this image of, respectability and stuff like that.
Mm.
I mean, that's what I was attracted to in the first place with poetry and just with fiction was, people that were just kind of out there.
Wanda Coleman, the first time I read her work, I felt like it's like reading her work is for me was like I didn't realize that I was parched. And then I read her work and I was like, oh, I needed water, right? I needed to have this very complex intersection of like intense vulnerability and fury communicated to me. And I didn't know that that's what I needed represented for me in work until I like read her work.
Yeah, she's so radical. And like she almost joined the Weather Underground at one point, and she was just all around LA to all these different underground scenes, and she's all that like it's reflected in her work, like this kind of people that she was around during the 60s, like during the 70s and stuff, and it just she's
I mean, she was a little wild. Like Wanda Coleman used to edit Players magazine.
I didn't know that.
So like, like Black Playboy, like she used to edit Players magazine. And I remember when I read that in A Taste of Brown Sugar, which is like a history of like Black porn. And then, you know, Muriel Miller Young, who wrote the book, who's a scholar who works on these kinds of studies, when she like dropped the fact, I was like, that's incredible. That's amazing. Because in Players magazine, there used to be short stories, there used to be essays, there used to be poems alongside, of course, the photographs. And so I was like, that's why that looked that way, right? Because Wanda Coleman, this complete and total, like you said, like radical badass, was editing that publication. I just found that to be incredible.
Yeah, she's an iconoclast. I've always been attracted to iconoclasts, for better or for worse.
I
But
mean,
people like that interests me, and they always will.
and so I think one of my last questions as we kind of come to close is being very, very curious about what your next adventure in poetry is looking like right now. But it may be too soon, right? We all need a moment to breathe once we like publish the last thing. And so if that isn't the right question, then how are you continuing as an individual and a poet at this time?
All right. Well, I have got a first rough draft of my next book ready to go. My editor has seen it.
Congratulations. Oh, your sound went out.
Here we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Well, let's see. I am teaching at the Iowa Writers Workshop until May. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do after that. I'm going to stay here or go back to Wisconsin. But there's some talk of me teaching a workshop for children in Madison this summer. I just want to continue to do a lot more teaching. I really, really love teaching. It's so fun. You know, I've wrote my work alone for many years, and now it feels great to be able to give back in a more direct way. And it's, you know, teaching for me is like really energizing and invigorating. So I hope to do more of that. Yeah, I'm not trying to look too far in the future. Just kind of taking it day by day, maybe even week by week. But you know, I'm feeling great about where I'm at. I gotta say that. I'm feeling really good.
Well, I want to say congratulations on your rough draft of like your next publication. Let us know, you know, we want to hear about it so we can like wait on bated breath for when we are able to see it. And I, you know, thank you for your generosity, like joining us tonight and just like engaging, you know, very directly and honestly in like the conversation about your work.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I hope I can come visit y'all sometime.
Oh, I mean, it's like we, just in case everybody knows, like now Lit Friday is starting to do like a live Lit Friday at the beginning of every year. And so our strategic planning is offering like more in-person options and possibly in the future, like an opportunity to like travel to people to interview them in person, but on like a digital platform. So we have greater accessibility to the conversations rather than it being like in place. So maybe I'll come to you.
Okay. Yeah, let's keep in touch. Thank you so much.
No, thank you so much. And good night, everybody. Get some good rest. And thank you for your patience when we, you know, we're going through our technical difficulties. And thanks for those who stuck around with our conversation and got all the goodies, because that's what we have for you. But I want to say good night to everybody, and Dylan can sign us off.